Hi, Paul. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So, Gary, I feel like is the peacemaker of the group. It just wants to keep peace in the family. And can you describe his relationship with Joanne and Orson a little bit? Because it just to me seems like Joanne doesn't have the same kind of love that Gary is showing her at the present time. But I also do love the interaction that he is having with Orson because he does want to have that kind of a fatherly figure in his life. He wants to be that person for him since his father is not there. So I
Yeah.
am loving that dynamic as well. But what can you say about that dynamic between Joanne and Gary? Because it's just very hot and cold between
Right,
those two.
right. Yeah. That's one way to put it for sure.
I was trying to
Cold,
be nice.
cold and cold. I think what one of the things that Jonathan Glatzer was great about, the writer, is how Gary and Joanne met and fell in love, and what that relationship was, which was quickly. He was a professor of psychiatry at Stanford, and he was her dissertation advisor, which is, I think, not that ethical. And so he left. They had fallen in love. And he was a bit of a star, and he put out a book, and he thought it was going to be a big deal, and it kind of wasn't. But, he was kind of, I think she was the adoring younger wife. And those days have faded. And that's a tough adjustment for them. Tough adjustment for Gary in particular. I mean, he's not respected in his own home the way that he was, and I think his um, career seems to be a bit of a disappointment. At the same time, this kid comes into their lives, or into his life, who he doesn't really, you know, care that much about. It doesn't seem to be his deal. And then because that kid is having some issues, it becomes a little bit of a pain for Gary, which makes him pay attention, try to deal with it. He screws it up. And then he really has to get involved. And then something kind of wonderful happens, which is they really start to have a bond. I think that, as you said, Orson is looking for a father figure or any kind of parental figure. And Gary is looking somewhere to put this empathy that he feels is kind of wasted in his practice. And he doesn't really have much love going back and forth with him and his wife. So they kind of find each other mid-season. And I think that's kind of one of the glimmers of hope in the show. And we'll see what happens in the second season. But I think for the time being, there's some hope there.
I think, in my opinion, and I may have clued this in wrong with Gary, I feel like he's so oblivious to what Joanne is doing. And all I keep thinking about is how would Gary react if he were to find out about Joanne's dealings? Because as you just said a few moments ago, he's in a rut and he wants to keep that empathetic relationship going. But I also feel like he could fall into that trap too, where if he were to find things out, especially with what Joanne is doing, could he somehow deviate into something similar or
It's a
something
really good
shady?
question. I feel like it's interesting when he starts getting a whiff that Duncan is up to something with Joanne. Of course, he assumes it's an affair. And then when he finds out that it's blackmail, he just assumes that she has done nothing wrong. Like he even asks, naively, was there an ethical lapse? He asks it of course not. I'm not 100% sure that Gary would cross that line. I mean, it is a Jonathan Glatzer show, so he probably would, because it seems like a lot of people doing stuff they never thought they would do. And it'll be
Fair.
now that I'm thinking about it, it sounds pretty fun to act. But I do think this is a guy who's, I mean, not his whole identity, but a good deal of his identity is based around the fact that he is a psychiatrist. He takes it incredibly seriously. And so those ethics, that's a huge part of it. And I think I think he would have a real problem with Joanne having done it. If it comes out in season two, I think that it's going to be a real thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.